What up, yo? Welcome back to Forever Backlog, the show where I review my gaming backlog as I go through it for your viewing pleasure. First off, let me just say, you might have seen some gameplay videos pop up on the channel. Now, fret not, as I pointed out on the Facebook page, the reviews will continue to be the main focus on the channel and where I devote most of my time. I just figured I'd have a couple uploads as a carryover between the reviews, as the playthrough videos take considerably less time to make. Okay, with that out of the way, let's have our big dramatic reveal for this episode, which is for... That's right, this week I bring you BAYONETTA. BOOTYNETTA. Wait, BAYONETTA's Boobs Macass Cleavage. Bayonetta was developed by Platinum Games and released in early 2010 on the PS3 and Xbox 360 by Sega. It was then re-released by Nintendo on the Wii U in 2014 as a part of a bundle for its sequel. Bayonetta is very much your typical third-person hack and slasher. You get to mow down waves of enemies with increasingly crazier combos, unlock special powers, go from one boss battle to the other, all the while keeping a mostly frantic pace. It came out to a very positive reception, as is clearly evidenced by this thingy over here. In it, you play as Bayonetta, the satanical devil-worshipping witch. Bayonetta is part of the Umbra Witches, whom you can easily identify by having guns latched onto their high heels, and drawing power from the demons of hell too, I guess. They are responsible for preserving the balance between darkness and light in the world, along with their counterparts, the Lumen Sages, who do not have guns attached to their shoes and therefore not nearly as cool. As the game begins, our lead character is dealing with a loss of memory that spans some 500 years. She finally awakens to her true purpose as she learns that she has to track down some ancient artifact that is really important, and I guess also being sought out by the angels, who look like they're the bad guys in all of this somehow, and oh look, monsters to kill! So as I mentioned, this is your typical hack and slash game, in the same vein as your Ninja Gaidens, your Devil May Cry's, your God of Wars, and as such, it's really in the action and the combat where the game has to prove itself for the most part. And how does Bayonetta fare on that front? Pretty fucking good, actually. The combat is very fluid and fast-paced, the combos are fun to pull off, and the various weapons and accessories you collect throughout all have a unique feeling to them. And the way your screen will explode with huge demon powers at the end of your combos, or how the powers you choose to unlock have a deep impact on the gameplay, cannot be overlooked. There's also a great focus on a single mechanic called Witch Time, that is activated if you manage to dodge an incoming attack at the last second. If done successfully, time will then briefly slow down for you only, leaving an opportunity for your enemies to be abused without them having a chance to react. It comes into play in boss battles and as a means of solving environmental mini-puzzles as well. It's one of those things where you run the risk of having your game rely too heavily on this one mechanic, to the point of it becoming stale or taking the fun out of it. But there's something about timing the baddies' attacks just right and then wailing on them while they're helplessly trapped moving in slow motion that keeps it fun throughout most of the game. The character design and the overall makeup of the game is also something that immediately jumps out at you. Everything from the action sequences to the character models are unapologetically over the top. Not only that, the game keeps taking it one step further all throughout, long after you think it stopped outdoing itself. What's more, the character design in this game is just plain gorgeous, both in concept and execution. You've already noticed that everything in this game carries with it at least a hint of spectacle. One of the most rewarding things is how even amidst the most crowded of combat sequences, the game will maintain its identity and its characteristic design, without compromising in terms of combat mechanics and the skill demanded of the player. There's also a lot of smaller, nuanced details to enjoy. The way new enemies and bosses are introduced in this ominous manner is such a cool and effective way to let you know that you are in for some shit. Then you contrast that with how Bayonetta just refuses to be impressed by any of her foes, no matter their numbers, how impossibly big they are, their power, or how they try and threaten her. In fact, the character of Bayonetta is just so refreshing and easy to root for with her unwavering confidence and swagger. That also then has a funny way of translating into you as the player not being intimidated as you're thrown into these giant boss battles. Even the set piece sequences ooze that same over-the-top action cheesiness. I mean, just look at this. From bike chases to riding on top of fucking missiles, this game really does try its best to deliver one epic moment after the other, and it just keeps ramping up as you go along, and for all the things it does right, Bayonetta is not without its frustrations. To wit. First, there's the plot. It was unclear to me while playing through it whether they were going for a B-movie so bad it's good type, or aiming for something a little deeper and just botched the execution. I mean, I think it's the former, but it's presented in such an unnecessarily convoluted way, you don't even know what you're doing half the time or even why. There's so much that's kept hidden from you for so long, force-feeding you some generic backstory through collectibles, hinting at some grand reveal when in the end all it amounts to is bad guy is bad, stop bad guy. Again, it looks like a B-movie plot, but the way it's presented is very different than the mostly playful tone you get from everything else in the game. Adding to that, I have to bring up the supporting cast. Here it looks like the game ends up shooting itself in the foot. I mean, in the very beginning you're introduced to these two guys as Bayonetta's accomplices who, while typecast, look like the kind of characters you'd want to keep around to play off your protagonist. Instead, they're ripped from the storyline within the first minutes of gameplay, only to be eventually replaced by this piece of cardboard and this other piece of cardboard. Okay, Rodin technically sticks around, but only in a shopkeep type of role. It's almost like they tease you with what looks like some great character chemistry, only to immediately take it away, leaving you with a forced puppy love interest and this thing that just screams escort mission, and nobody likes those. Speaking of things nobody likes, quick time events. Hey guys, you know what would really go well with our high-paced frenetic combat game? Timed button presses! It's not even just on platforming or set-piece sequences that these show up, it's during actual combat. Most notably, you might go through an entire boss fight trying not to die, only to fail in the end by mistiming some button press that you never know to expect. Quicktime events might make some shred of sense in some very specific genres. They most certainly do not make any sense whatsoever in this one. I also had an issue with how some bosses are immune to the witch time ability and some aren't, and how that just throws most of how you get used to playing the game out of whack. And lastly, I know I just talked about how you have these cool set piece sequences that elevate the game's action to even higher levels of ridiculousness, but almost every single one of them felt way too long. Don't get me wrong, they are fun, but they should have been used as short bursts to vary up the gameplay every so often, whereas they end up feeling like a chore by the end. On almost all of them, I felt like I was doing something wrong at some point because it felt like a bike chase should not be that long. I realize that might make it sound like there are more bad things to this game than there are good, which I did not think at all. It's just me nitpicking some very specific, poor design choices that lay on top what is otherwise some very solid gameplay. In fact, let me skip ahead right now and ask, should you move Bayonetta up or down on your backlog? If you're a fan of free-for-all hack-and-slash games, I'd say this is one of the quintessential entries in the genre. There's loads of screen-filling battles and high-powered button mashing to appeal to even the most casual gamer, while still being hard to master and having an unforgiving rating system to satisfy all your hardcore needs. Hardcore needs. And as such, if this is your type of game, I would recommend you move it up on your backlog, as on the one hand, this is something that already came out with some noticeable performance issues, and on the other, I felt some of the graphics, especially in the ambience and the scenery, are beginning to show their age a little bit. Despite all my nitpicking, this game is carried on the shoulders of its fun and deep combat mechanics, its wonderfully over-the-top persona, its badass protagonist, and most of all, its originality. Overall, that makes for a very fun outing. Most of the things I can point out that I had a problem with in this game can be summed up by, the combat is great, stop taking away from the combat. Moreover, while playing through it, it's easy to imagine how the sequel garnered even higher praise, as a mere fix of all the small things that held the original back would result in an even greater experience. In closing, let me just mention that if you have your choice of system, the PS3 definitely has the worst port of the game, so bear that in mind. That's my review, guys, and that's it for another episode. Rest assured I'll be back to putting these out more frequently. Let me know if you plan on playing Bayonetta in the future, or how did you like it if you already have. Please leave a like in the video if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe for more backlogged goodness. Take care everybody, have a kick-ass new year, and I will see you all soon.